As a Michigan fan, I am so excited to see this game in person. Yes, I am making the great trek out to support my own team in the environment of Beaver Stadium. I am traveling with my cousin, who's a Michigan fan, and his father, my uncle, who has been a committed Penn State fan since day one. I'm very excited. Get to sit in the upper deck. Very pumped for this game, and that's why today I'm going to be previewing it, and at the end of the video giving my prediction. Michigan is given a 53.9% chance to win this game according to ESPN's FPI, and is favored by 1.5 points to win. Just some stat backgrounds before we preview position by position. Michigan scores about 36.2 points per game. Penn State scores 26.8. Both allow around 16 points. Michigan allows about a point less, but, what's the difference between 16 points allowed per game and 16.7 points allowed per game? Michigan, on average, has 451 total yards of offense per game. Penn State with 384. Michigan's run and pass offenses are close to even, and that's because that Michigan State game, their D-line defended our run pretty well while we aired it out. Those passing numbers are a little inflated, but I fully expect Michigan to have to pass more against Penn State and Ohio State than they have in a lot of their previous games. Penn State has 277 yards passing, only 100 yards rushing, though. And we'll discuss that later with the position-by-position breakdown. And finally, Michigan allows just under 300 yards per game. Penn State allows 350. You look at these stats, and seeing how Michigan's 6th, Penn State is unranked, and looking how Penn State lost to Illinois at home, among other things, if you did not know this sport pretty well, you'd think, oh, Michigan, easy. Here's the thing, though. Penn State, if they lose, whoever loses this game, the coach who loses this game is going to be viewed as an idiot by the respective fan bases. Franklin loses this game. He's now lost to Michigan twice at Beaver Stadium. He's lost 4 games in a season, I think for the first time since 2015, which shows regression in the program. And with all those, everyone assuming he's going to move away from Penn State, it might pressure him to do so. Not an expert on any of that stuff, just speaking what could be possible. Michigan, on the other hand, Michigan loses this game, then Jim Harbaugh, again, hasn't passed Penn State because Penn State's actually beaten Ohio State and won the Big Ten, and is probably going to go 9-3. At which point the fan base, including myself, will break because I just cannot take 9-3 anymore. Beat Ohio State once. It's all I'm asking you to do, and then win Indy. He can't even do it, even with his top 15 recruiting classes. It actually makes me sick to my stomach. So aside from that, we're now going to move on to the previewing of each position. You have the QB position. You have Sean Clifford and Cade McNamara. With Sean Clifford and Cade McNamara, here's the thing. Them passing the ball, I find to be pretty even. Now, you may be thinking you're insane. Clifford, is thrown for 16 touchdowns, 2,371 yards. And here's the thing. Their passer ratings are about the same. 141 for Clifford, 142 for Cade, which actually shocked me that Cade had a higher passer rating. That's asinine. Anyway, here's the other thing. Clifford has Jahan Dotson, who's basically Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, but for Penn State. Michigan doesn't have that. Also, Clifford turns over the ball more. Far more. He has 3 times the amount of picks that Cade McNamara does without even having double the amount of touchdowns. Has a higher He has a lower TD interception ratio than Cade does. But I still think Clifford's the better QB. And the reason behind that is, one, Clifford has had to pass more, so he will be more clutch, more reps. He's been the starter for this team for a while. Just more experience. But more importantly, he can run. Cade has shown that he can run, but only when there's like a wide open lane. Like when Michigan State was playing prevent defense some of those times, and even he had one against Indiana. Clifford, he can have a defender or two in front of him and still get the first down with a 10-yard scramble. Clifford is reliable on the ground, more proven. So Clifford, again, 2,371 passing yards, completes 64% of his passes, 16 touchdowns, 6 picks, averages just under 8 yards per pass. I trust him over McNamara, who has only 1,666 passing yards, completes 62.5% of his passes, averages exactly 8 yards per pass. He has 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Michigan does have better QB depth because, take out Cade, put in JJ, there's more risk, but I would not say that's nearly as bad as taking out Clifford and putting in Roberson. Roberson has actually 5 less passing attempts, can't even complete 40% of his passes, has 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and that just perfectly explains it. He also has a 62 passer rating, which is abysmally low. So, starter, I totally give the edge to Penn State. If for some reason both starters get injured and we have to go down to like tier 2, Michigan has better depth. But again, Penn State for the starting QB has the edge. Starting O-line, and I'm mainly only going to talk about starters here because it's not like the entire starting lineup of both teams will be injured. You never know though. The offensive line, Michigan totally ahead of Penn State. J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara only have 6 sacks. And some of that is actually by their own doing. Like McCarthy trying to do too much. Sean Clifford and Roberson have been sacked 20 times. And you add that onto the fact that Penn State can't run the football while Michigan can run it at will. Michigan obviously is the better O-line. I don't even want to talk about it for that much. I'm more interested in talking about the running backs. But I will add, Michigan has had some injuries at the offensive line position, and they've still played really well. So Michigan's O-line, congratulations to you. You might actually be one of the best, if not the best, in the Big Ten. We'll see about that when you face Ohio State and Penn State's defensive line. For the running game, your backs, I would give Michigan the absolute edge when it comes to the running back room. And even just the rush game in general. Michigan occasionally will like to run end-arounds. Occasionally you'll want to get J.J. McCarthy with that option, or just him scrambling out like a design scramble for a first down. Hassan Haskins is 829 rushing yards, averages 5 yards per rush, and has 11 rushing touchdowns. Corum has 778 rushing yards, averages 6 yards per rush, and has 10 rushing touchdowns. Corum was in the medical tent against Indiana, but Harbaugh said him, along with Henning, and I believe Andrell Anthony, freshman wide receiver, and others have a chance to play against Penn State. Some have a great chance to play. So luckily, a lot of the injuries that were sustained don't sound like they will hinder us too much against Penn State. Also means do not be using excuses if we lose to Penn State. And on to Penn State's running backs. Noah Cain, listen, I don't even know why he has almost a third of the rushing attempts, that Penn State does. But he apparently, I don't know why. If you're a Penn State fan, explain that to me below, because I don't understand why Noah Cain, who averages 3 yards per rush with only 4 touchdowns, 293 yards, the run game has struggled all year. Why do you run it so much? I understand it might be to keep the defense honest, but there are some areas where it's like James Franklin, you can't run the football. but you have Dotson, you have Washington, you have Lambert Smith. Your running backs can even catch the ball and get first downs, which not every team can say that. Why don't you pass more? We'll get to the passing game later, but Noah Cain with 293 rushing yards, only 3.2 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns is kind of a joke compared to Michigan's running back room. Kevon Lee, however, I'm impressed by. Even behind that O-line who can't always run block or isn't always the best, Lee has 287 rushing yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and a touchdown as well. John Lovett also has similar carries to Lee. He has 48 carries to Lee's 56. He has 160 yards, 3.3 yards per carry, and no touchdowns. Sean Clifford also has 122 yards on the ground. Donovan Edwards, Michigan's third stringer, has 139 rushing yards on the ground, but he has been out for a good chunk of time. So I would give the rush game in general, and if we're going to go specifics, I would give the running backs to the Michigan Wolverines here. Moving on to the receiving end of things. Receiving end of things, I'd give the whole just passing game, reception game to Penn State because of Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert-Smith. And again, if I'm assuming the two quarterbacks are relatively equal in passing, it comes down to who has the better wide receivers. Penn State, I would take Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, and Lambert-Smith over, let's just say, Cornelius Johnson, Sanistril, and Baldwin. I can't include Ronnie Bell since he's injured. That isn't fair. He's not going to have an impact outside of maybe motivating our players when it comes to the Penn State game. Dotson with 932 receiving yards, 13.1 average yards per reception, and 9 receiving touchdowns. He accounts for more than half of all of Penn State's receiving touchdowns. Parker Washington and Keandre Lambert-Smith have over 400 yards each receiving. Each of them have 2 touchdowns. You also have Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange, the tight ends, who have 176 and 156 receiving yards respectively. Johnson has 1 touchdown, Strange has 3. And Penn State's tight ends, they're not Pat Freiermuth or Gesicki, but they do get the job done. I might say they're even a little underrated. Michigan, you got Cornelius Johnson at wide receiver, who leads the team in receiving yards with 449 receiving yards, 16.6 average yards per reception, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Eric All is second in the team in receiving yards with 255. Mike Sanistril is third. He's a wide receiver. All's a tight end. 243 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Dalen Baldwin is fourth. I have not heard his name in quite some time. 219 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, both from McCarthy. Andrell Anthony, kind of honorable mention, has only 7 receptions, yet has nearly 200 receiving yards, averages 24.4 yards per reception, and 2 receiving touchdowns. He had a long of 93 against Michigan State. I hope that he is in, honestly, because having him, he could be an X factor in a certain sense, like he was against Michigan State. I would give Michigan's tight ends the edge over Penn State's tight ends. Wide receivers, though, I just have to give those to Penn State. Jahan Dotson is amazing. Easy first-round draft pick, to be honest with you. Defense, it gets a little more tricky because I don't think there are plenty of clear differences between these defenses. You know, Penn State, we knew from the beginning, well, really since they played Wisconsin and going throughout the year, that their defense is solid all around. I thought that their coverage would be good. I had some questions about the D-line and linebackers. They've proven me wrong there. Penn State is good all around. Michigan, outside of, having a bad rush defense against State, which Penn State had against Illinois, Michigan's all around solid as well. So I think these two defenses are similar. And excluding both of their bad games, like one bad game really defensively against the rush, I will say this before we get deep into previewing. From my understanding, looking at everything, Michigan is better at pass rush, just up front, and Penn State's kind of better up front at stopping the run. And I say that because when it mattered in a big game, Penn State was able to stop Henderson more than Michigan was able to stop Kenneth Walker. And Michigan does have a pair of edge rushers in Hutchinson and Ojabo, and Penn State doesn't necessarily have that. Coverage-wise, I would give Penn State the edge with Jair Brown and Jaquan Brisker. But let's get into individual players and their stats. Michigan, you got Josh Ross and Daxton Hill, who lead in total tackles with 61 and 48 respectively. Both have half a sack. Ross has 2 passes defended. Daxton Hill has 6 passes defended and 2 picks. Nakai Hill-Green is third in total tackles with 36 and 1 pass defended. Junior Colson, who I believe is a freshman, in fact, a true freshman, is fourth in total tackles with 35, and he also has a pass defended and a fumble recovery. In sacks, David Ojabo with 8, and he has 3 passes defended, 4 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery. Guys, him and Hutchinson are deadly. Absolutely deadly. Watching what they did to Thorne was unbelievable. And granted, Michigan State's O-line, we know it's weak, but nonetheless, it's impressive what they do. I mean, Ojabo could very realistically, because we play Maryland and Ohio State's O-line doesn't look the greatest at the moment, we could see Ojabo meet or even pass that 12-sack record. I think it's 12 sacks in the regular season or entire season. I can't remember. All I know is the number is 12. You could see him pass that. And Hutchinson, ESPN says he has 6 sacks. He does actually have 7. I think that's a incorrect stat line from ESPN's perspective. Nonetheless, Ojabo and Hutchinson are both likely first-round picks. Both have at least 2 passes defended. Hutchinson has 1 forced fumble and a fumble recovery as well. Taylor Upshaw is third in sacks with 2.5 sacks, but he only has 6 total tackles. And finally, the leaders in interceptions, Daxton Hill with 2, RJ Moten, Jamon Green, DJ Turner, and Mike Morris all have 1, which means Michigan does have 6 interceptions, 7 fumble recoveries, and we have 20 total sacks. Go over to Penn State. And Penn State, what stinks for their fans, and I feel them here, a key player on their line is out for the year in PJ Mustipher. He only had a sack and 21 total tackles, but just because you don't lead in stats doesn't mean you're a key player. An example with Michigan is, the steady Brad Hawkins, who has 33 total tackles and only 4 passes defended. He does have 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery, but his name isn't always mentioned. Similar with Christopher Hinton, the defensive lineman. They're not huge leaders, necessarily, but they do their part. Just because your name isn't big and always out there doesn't mean you do your part. And you could tell that their D-line was hurting against Illinois without him. But against Ohio State, they found their way. They only allowed 14 points against Maryland. They did not look the greatest, but their defense definitely won them that game, as we know that Talia Tagovailoa would light up a poor defense. He lights up poor defenses, struggles against good defenses. Penn State's a good defense. Arnold Ebiketie, the defensive end, has 6.5 total sacks and 46 total tackles. You also do have, Penn State's secondary, you have 10 picks, and Jair Brown has 4 of them. Jaquan Brisker has 2. Brown also has a pick 6 and 2 fumble recoveries and a forced fumble. 48 total tackles. Him and Brisker are safeties. So Penn State, with just their safeties, even cornerbacks, but I'd say more so safeties, are just something else. Absolutely something else. I knew Brisker was going to be a key player. Brown being just leading him in picks and even fumble recoveries and tackles. Brown is also very good. Tariq Castro-Fields as well is a player who is mentioned. He leads the team in passes defended and has 27 total tackles. Joey Porter Jr. and Daquan Hardy, cornerbacks, have 1 sack each as well. And their leader in total tackles, the top 2 are linebackers, Ellis Brooks and Brandon Smith. Brooks has 69 total tackles, Smith with 61. Brooks has 1 sack, Smith has 2. So here I would say, Michigan is the better pass rushing duo. They have 20 sacks to Penn State's 17. Penn State is just better when it comes to coverage. Penn State, you just look at this. They might allow more pass yards, but granted, they did just play Ohio State. And I don't know, to me, I feel like Michigan's pass rush does hide their inability to cover really good wide receivers. I could be proven wrong. The secondary has been impressing me throughout the year because, like with Michigan State, you got Walker, so you have to keep your eyes on him. Michigan did not allow Thorne to always tear them up. They allowed some big plays, but they did better against Thorne than I thought they would. So Michigan's better at, I'd say, underrated in the pass coverage game. I'd say both of these defensive lines, or defenses in general, their kryptonite is probably allowing big running plays, is what I would say. Saw that against Illinois with Penn State, even somewhat against Ohio State. And Michigan, you definitely saw that against Michigan State, and even Northwestern or at other points. They do allow big plays on the ground. They pretty much contain big plays through the air, though, to be honest with you. Their defenses are pretty even, Steven. I would say Penn State's all-around is better, but Michigan's offense and that pass rush duo puts them in really good positions, along with Michigan's special teams, who I would say is also slightly has an edge. So that right there is my preview here. I think overall on offense, it's pretty close. I would say, though, I would honestly give Michigan the edge. They score more points. They're more consistent. Yes, they are often held to field goals, but personnel-wise, not really including the scheme, I'd say Michigan has the better offense. Defense, we haven't seen Michigan, against a team like Penn State who can pass. And Michigan does lead Penn State in sacks. Defense is pretty close. I will say I'm not going to decide who has the better defense. I think both of these defenses are really stinking good. And I think I described their vulnerability pretty clearly, and that's big plays on the ground. Penn State allowing 300 yards of rushing to Illinois. Michigan allowing Kenneth Walker to waltz into the end zone 5 times when he doesn't even have an O-line in front of him. So that's my preview. Now on to my prediction. My prediction is this game will be low scoring. Very low scoring. These defenses are better than the offenses are, to be fair with you, in general. Penn State, again, they have a D-line, they have linebackers, they have a secondary. Michigan is the exact same thing. Both have offensive inconsistencies. Michigan can't always find the red zone. Penn State can't even run the football. So I would not be surprised, I'm not a betting expert, I would not be surprised if this game hit the under 48.5. I will, though, take Michigan to win and definitely win by more than 1.5 points. I think Michigan will win by 3 to 10 points. It could even turn into the Wisconsin game, honestly, because Penn State and Wisconsin, they had a very close matchup. Both of their teams are very similar, where their defense is much better than their offense, and their offense is not the greatest, but their defenses are really good. They're actually pretty similar teams outside of how their offenses function, per se. So Michigan, I think, will win, but it is a close game. It will be a close game. Pretty evenly matched opponents in many regards. I just think Michigan is more consistent. I think that Michigan, again, Harbaugh's playing for his job. This team is resilient. I do have faith in my team, and that's my prediction. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts below. Again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts below. Who do you think wins this matchup? Do you think that I'm absolutely wrong and that Penn State's going to once again beat Michigan in Beaver Stadium? If Penn State wins this game, they will win 3 in a row against the Wolverines. Tell me your prediction in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around.